Wonderful. All right. So what I've done here is gone to PubMed, which is a search tool for peer-reviewed research. And I'm going to walk you through quickly how to find, evaluate, and then utilize the research literature. This is the kind of thing that takes a decade to learn. And so we are really going massively broad strokes here, but just to give you a little taste of what this might be like. So I'm going to put in, well, first of all, I've gone to PubMed, and even though this URL looks complicated, if you just type pubmed.com, it'll take you there. And let's put in yoga and diabetes. Okay, so you just, it automatically puts an and between. You can just put in your population or condition of interest and search. And you'll end up with a list of peer-reviewed literature related to that topic. So what I have done here is I've already clicked on clinical trial. So without that clicked, you get everything that's been written about this topic. And in some cases, it's people's commentary or letters to the editor. And so if you want actual research studies, then you just click the filter for clinical trial. I would also suggest clicking full text, which means that you're going to find only articles that are actually available.
Awesome.
You could even click free full text, and then you know you're not going to have to pay for the article. That does bias your findings somewhat, but it does save you money. So just for argument's sake, let's unclick full text and just so you can see what can be done for free. And so we have 12 articles here. And this is the summary, but up here I can actually click on the abstract instead, and then it's going to give me a list of all of the abstracts. And so when I'm looking to see what I might actually want to talk about in my marketing, there are a couple of things that I want to look for. One is the study design. So this one right here says a pilot randomized controlled trial. A pilot is always a small test. So it's to really work out whether the study design is feasible, whether it works. It's generally going to be a pretty small sample size. So when you can avoid talking about a pilot, you want to avoid that. Here on the other, and here's another one, a feasibility study. So it's a randomized controlled trial, but it's a feasibility study. So they're testing out the methods. Again, another, a pilot randomized controlled trial. Whereas here is one that does not say that it's a pilot. It's a randomized controlled trial. So randomized controlled trial tends to be sort of the gold standard of research design. So if you find a randomized controlled trial, that's a pretty good bet. So that's one thing you want to look for is study design. Two, you want to look at the sample size. So in this abstract, they should tell us how many people were involved. And here in the results, you see it's 180 participants were randomized and 135 completed the trial. That's pretty respectable. If it were 10 people, then that wouldn't really be enough data to say anything worthwhile about. So you want to look for a sample size that, you know, in the hundreds is pretty good for a yoga study. The third thing you want to look for is the publication date. And in fact, if I go back up to the top, I can even filter and say, I only want to look at things that are within the last 5 years. You don't want to go more than 10 years, especially in the yoga literature. There was a big uptick in about 2010 in both the quality and the quantity of yoga research. So you definitely shouldn't have to go back farther than that to find something. And now, now that I've filtered for 5 years, you're going to see that the one I was just looking at, I think was in 2014. So that one is still here. But that's another thing to look at is just, and it would be up here in the, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but up here at the top of the listing, it has 2014. So that's where you find the publication date. You don't want outdated science. And then lastly, look at where it was published. So this is the Journal of Diabetes Complications. That means that it's a diabetes journal, not a yoga journal. You want to look for something that sounds respectable. that when you're quoting it in your marketing materials, it doesn't sound odd or unscientific. And you can also check for, so this is a very strong one, BMC. You can look at what's called the impact factor. So the impact factor of a journal is how big of a reach it has, and the impact factor tends to be tied to how reputable it is. And you can just do a Google search and look for the impact factor for the journal that you're considering. So those are the 4 things that you want to look for when choosing a research study to talk about in your marketing: study design, the sample size, the publication date, and the publication itself in terms of its impact and prestige. Then you actually have to read the paper. Even if you might not understand it all. And when so there's going to be a link at the bottom. So here's an example. It says open access, free full text. So we click on the link, it brings us to the paper. You don't have to understand the whole thing, but you should understand the methods. In the methods, it's going to tell you what yoga they did and who exactly the people were and whether it's comparable to the people that you work with. So for example, if you're working with octogenarians and the study was done in 20-year-olds, it may not be relevant. If it was in type 1 diabetes and you mostly work with type 2 diabetes, that's important. And then if you look at the yoga and you think, oh, well, this doesn't make any sense, or I would never do this with my people, or, you know, they went on a retreat for 2 weeks and they felt better, but you're working with people once a week over 8 weeks, it's a very different experience. So you do want to read the paper and actually find out what they did and whether it's relevant to what you might want to promote. And then in talking about the article, there are 4 things to keep in mind. 1, you want to be selective. You don't want to suggest that yoga is a miracle drug that is going to cure absolutely everything on the planet, even though you may feel that way, because it seems like it's too good to be true. And that makes it less believable. It's actually more believable to say less and say it well. So select a few things. So if there's a diabetes population, you want to select 1 or 2 important things that changed in this study that might be powerful, and especially if they're clinical markers as opposed to people feeling better, which we know is important. But when people see numbers that change that are objective and measurable, that tends to be a little bit more powerful. So be selective about what you share. Be specific about what the changes were. So if the change reduced by a certain percentage or it reduced by this many points, say exactly what happened instead of just blood sugar improved, which is vague. And then be modest. So what you want to say about a study is that the study suggests that yoga may help to improve blood sugar control, as opposed to yoga will cure diabetes. Okay, the more fantastical your statement is, the less believable it is. And scientists and medical professionals tend to be conservative in the conclusions they make about how effective something is. And you're basing your information on 1 or just a few research studies. And we know that in order to conclude something, you really want a preponderance of evidence. So whatever you see in the literature is a suggestion, an association, a relationship between variables, as opposed to this study proves that yoga fixes this problem. So you want to be modest. And then 4th, you want to cite it. Use APA citation or MLA citation or whatever it is that you learned in college. Go look it up on Google to cite something correctly and provide a reference, which shows that you didn't just make this up. And if people want more information, they can go back to the source. So again, when you're talking about the literature, you want to be selective in the information that you share. You want to be specific about what the findings were. You want to be modest in your conclusions about it, and you want to cite it.